Manchester, England, 1842, 5 a.m. 7-year-old Sarah stumbles through the factory gates. She's been awake since 4:30. She won't see daylight again until Sunday. This is her life. This is all she knows. This channel is dedicated to understanding communism, not to glorify it, not to promote it, but to understand it. Where did it come from? Why did it emerge? What problems was it trying to solve? You cannot understand communism without understanding this, the world that created it. This is that world. The world of industrial workers in the early 1800s. The world that millions lived in. The world that demanded answers. 5 a.m. The bell rings. Late by even minutes? You're fined. Missed too many days? Dismissed. 14 to 16 hours daily. 6 days a week. Standing at your machine. No chair. No breaks except lunch. The air is thick with cotton dust. Every breath fills your lungs. By age 30, many workers cough blood. The danger is constant. No safety guards. Exposed gears. Fast-moving belts. Year 1842. A young girl named Mary Richards gets her hair caught in machinery. She's scalped. She dies 3 days later. The factory pays nothing to her family. Another child takes her position the next day. Overseers patrol constantly. Talking, beaten, and fined. Sitting, beaten, and fined. Working too slowly, beaten, and fined. Historian Emma Griffin analyzed over 600 working-class autobiographies. One worker wrote, "I cannot remember a single day when I was not tired, not sleepy tired, tired in my bones. Summer brings unbearable heat, over 100 degrees inside textile mills. Windows stay closed for humidity. Workers faint regularly. Winter brings cold. Your fingers go numb, but the machines don't stop. 12:30 p.m., 30 minutes for lunch, bread, maybe cheese, then back. 9 p.m. Finally, you stumble out into darkness. You arrived in darkness. You never saw the sun. Now you walk home. Little Ireland, Manchester, 1844. Population 4,000 people crammed into an area barely 400 yards across. One room per family, sometimes 2 families sharing. The Murphy family, 7 people. One room, 12 feet by 12 feet. Sleeping, eating, living, dying, all in this space. Walls are thin, floors rotting. The window is broken, stuffed with rags. In winter, ice forms on the inside walls. And the Murphys are fortunate. Their room is above ground. Thousands live in cellars, below street level, always damp, no windows, rats everywhere. Water comes from one pump shared by 50 families. In winter, it freezes. In summer, it runs brown. Is it safe? Probably not. But what choice do you have? Sewage doesn't go anywhere. Cesspools overflow. Open drains in streets. Human waste accumulates everywhere. Historian Friedrich Langer studied housing across industrial Europe. In Manchester's working-class districts, average life expectancy was 17 years. 17 years total from birth. Walk 1 mile and you're in a different world. Wide streets, clean air, gardens, spacious houses, Disease spreads like wildfire. 1832 cholera epidemic. In working-class neighborhoods, entire buildings wiped out. In wealthy neighborhoods 1 mile away, barely anyone dies. In some slums, half of all children die before age 5. This is home. This is where you try to rest before the bell rings at 5 a.m. Saturday, payday, 84 hours this week. Your wage, 8 to 10 shillings if you're skilled, 6 to 8 if not. A woman doing the same work, 4 to 6 shillings. A child, 2 to 3 shillings. But first, deductions. Fined for talking, 6 pence. Fined for being late, 4 pence. Equipment damage, 1 shilling. The mathematics rent, 4 to 5 shillings weekly. Bread, 4 pence per loaf. You need several. Coal for winter, 1 shilling if you can afford it. Your wife takes in washing or sewing, 2 to 3 shillings more. It's still not enough, so your children work. All of them. Your 10-year-old, 3 shillings weekly. Your 8-year-old, 2 shillings. Without their wages, your family starves. Historian Gareth Stedman Jones analyzed wage records across industrial cities. Factory wages were calculated precisely, subsistence level exactly, enough to survive, enough to return tomorrow, nothing more. Government investigation, 1842. Child testimonies. Sarah Gooder, age 8, coal mine trapper. I trap without a light and I'm scared. I go at 4 in the morning, come out at 5 and half past. Sometimes I sing when I've light, but not in the dark. I dare not sing then. She sits in complete darkness, 12 to 14 hours, alone, at 8 years old. Patience Kershaw, age 17. I hurry coal on my hands and feet. The water comes over our clog tops always. My clothes are wet through almost all day long. I have a belt round my waist and a chain passing between my legs. The work deforms children's bodies. Curved spines, stunted growth, scarred lungs. Bodies break before they finish growing. You can never save, never improve. At 50, you'll do the same work for the same wage. Actually less. Older workers get paid less or fired. But what happens when your body gives out? Get injured? The factory pays nothing. No compensation, no pension, no medical care. You're dismissed. Get sick? Same situation. No sick pay, no insurance. Can't work? Don't get paid. So you pawn everything. Clothes, blankets, shoes. You tell yourself you'll get them back. You never do. When you've sold everything, there's one place left, the workhouse. Families separated immediately. Men, women, children, all apart. You might never see your family again. The work is brutal and pointless. Breaking rocks, picking oakum until your fingers bleed. The food is minimal, gruel, bread, just enough to survive. Workers will starve before going to the workhouse. Old means 45 or 50. Your body is wrecked, lungs scarred, joints broken, hands shaking. The factory doesn't retire you. There is no pension. You work until you physically cannot. Then you're dismissed. Historian Jane Humphreys studied mortality data. In the same city, a wealthy man lived to 55 to 60. A worker, 35 to 40. 20 years difference, entirely from working conditions, housing, nutrition, healthcare access. Death was constant. The most important institutions were funeral societies. Everyone paid pennies weekly, so when someone died, the family could afford burial. The greatest fear? Dying with no one able to pay. Being thrown in a common pit, unmarked, forgotten. This was the life cycle: birth into poverty, work from childhood, early death. But somehow, people survived. In all this suffering, workers created community. Not because they had resources, because survival required it. When one family had extra, they shared. Flour, milk, coal on a freezing night. Not charity, reciprocity. Today I help you. Tomorrow you help me. Women formed networks, watched each other's children, helped during births, nursed each other's sick. Workers created friendly societies. Everyone paid pennies weekly. When someone got sick, the society paid a little. When someone died, the society paid for burial. Often illegal, but essential. Sunday, factories closed. Workers gathered. Not to drink, they couldn't afford it, but to talk, to remember they were human. Children played when they could, created joy where there was none. Historian E.P. Thompson. The working class wasn't just shaped by exploitation. They actively created their own culture, their own values. They developed codes: never betray a fellow worker, share when you have, stand together. By the 1840s, workers were asking questions. Why do we create everything but own nothing? Why do they live in luxury while we starve? Why do our children work while theirs play? One textile worker, 1844. We are told we are free, free to work or starve. This is not freedom. This is a new slavery. Another, the machine is not our enemy. The system that uses it to grind us down is our enemy. By 1847, these questions were everywhere. In Lyon, in German states, in Belgium, wherever factories existed, in pubs, in underground meetings, in pamphlets passed secretly. Workers weren't waiting for intellectuals. They were analyzing it themselves. But they didn't have a comprehensive answer yet. Reform seemed insufficient. Charity seemed insulting. Religion offered comfort, but not change. The suffering was too vast. The injustice too fundamental. Workers sensed something bigger was needed. A complete transformation. They didn't know what that looked like yet. They didn't have the theory. They didn't have the program. But they knew the questions. They knew something had to change. And they were beginning to understand that they, the workers themselves, would have to be the ones to change it. This was life for millions across industrial Europe. Children working from age 5, families in single rooms, wages at starvation level, bodies broken by 30. This world wasn't accidental. It was created by specific choices, specific systems, and it's this world that gave birth to communism.